It's time for another Dice Tower review with Zee Garcia.
Hey everybody, Zee Garcia here. You know, I'm a big fan of trick-taking games, but there's precious few of them that work with two players. I just reviewed one not too long ago called The Fox in the Forest. Gave that a very positive review, and that's a good one. Well, here today I have another one made just for two players, and that is called Claim, designed by Scott Almes, put out by White Goblin Games. In this one, the players are trying to control specific groups, specific factions that will show up in the game in order to become the new king. So let's take a look at the game, and then we'll come back after that, and I'll tell you if it's a good trick-taking game. Here we go. So here's basically what you get with the game. Very simple. You got a deck of cards, which I've already shuffled up and divided here just for the explanation, and then some aids for the different powers of the characters that show up in the deck of cards. We have a few other languages there. I'll move these aside for now. Each of the two players would get one of these. We shuffle up the deck. Each player gets 13 cards, and you are ready to begin. So what you are trying to do is become the new leader of the land by controlling 3 or more of the 5 factions that show up in the game. And the way you're going to be doing that is by playing cards and taking those tricks as you are playing. Okay, so a trick-taking game, as I said. To begin, we're going to flip over one card. You pick who the star player is, and this is the card that we are going to be fighting over for this first part of the game, okay? The game has 2 very distinct halves. The first half, we are drafting our hand for the second half. The second half plays the same way, but it does not encompass gaining new cards. That already happens in the first half. The second half is mainly for control of those 5 groups of characters, all right? So here is what happens in the first half. I'm going to take a look at my hand of cards. This is what we're fighting over. And I can play, if I'm the start player, I can play any card I want to from my hand. So let's say I play this 6 in Knights, okay? My opponent then will play a card in response to this one, and they have to follow suit. This is Knights, they must play Knights, all right? With a few other caveats, which I'll talk about in just one second. So let's say they play that card there, they follow suit, I win, my Knight is larger than theirs, and so this is the card I'm going to take, I'm going to put it aside. This is the very beginning of my next 13 cards for the second half of the game. If I win, I take this card, my opponent takes a card blindly from the top. Might be better than mine, might be worse, okay? So they take that. These 2 are out, and we flip over a new card, and whoever won leads the next one. So I might play a 0 in Undead there, and then my opponent has to follow suit. So they might play a 5. Now they win, and they would take this card, and I get a blind one from the top. These are removed, flip over a new one, my opponent leads again, all right? So that's the basic flow, and that happens until all these cards are gone, and we have turned these into 13 cards for me, 13 cards for my opponent. And then we go through the trick-taking phase again with 13 cards, but in that second half of the game, when you win something, you put it directly in your score pile, and then at the end of the game, we are going to compare how many goblins I have to how many goblins they have. If I have more, I control the goblins. If I have more knights than them, I control the knights. If they have more undead than me, then they control the undead, and so on. And once we've figured out who controls which factions, if I control 3 or more, I win the game, all right? That's it. That's the very simple flow of the game. However, there's a little more to it because these characters, these different factions, have special powers, all right? So let's take a look at those very briefly right now. We've got the goblins. They have no special power, but there are more of them. You see, every suit has cards 0 through 9, but the goblins have several zeros. They have a larger suit, so there's more of them, okay? The knights, which we see right here, if you play a knight on a goblin trick, so my opponent plays that, and I play a knight, and I can only do that, by the way, if I cannot follow suit, I must have no goblins, then the knights always beat the goblins. That's just how that works. And so this would be a winning trick for me. However, there are fewer knights. They start at 2. They go 2 through 9, so there's fewer of these, more goblins. Then we have the undead. During the first half of the game, in which we are dividing the deck of cards, like I showed you, then the undead cards are already claimed and put into our scoring pile. And the way that works is whoever wins would take those cards and put them in their score pile. So just like I showed you earlier, someone played a 0, someone played a 5. Whoever wins actually puts this in their control pile already, their score pile. And that's already 2 towards controlling the undead. And again, that's during the first half of the game. We have the dwarves. The dwarves have a power that is in play during the second half of the game, after this claim deck is gone, okay? And the way that works is whoever loses a trick will take all the dwarves from that trick, because they like to root for the underdog. And so they are great to throw off in a when you are short in a suit. So for example, my opponent plays an 8 in knights. I don't have any knights, let's say. Well, I'll play a 9 in dwarves here. I lose. They work for me. That's how that works. And then lastly, the doppelgangers. Let's see, let's find us a doppelganger here. They can, of course, do what doppelgangers do. They will copy any other faction, any other group. And if you lead doppelgangers, your opponent must follow them. But anything else, if I lead knights and my opponent has these 2 cards, well, they could choose to play the knight. They must follow suit, but they can break that with a doppelganger. And they could follow suit with that. And that's basically it. They will, however, count for their own group at the end of the game. You still need to control them with just doppelganger cards. That's everything you need to know about the game. Very simple, very straightforward play. 2 hands of 13 tricks, and you are done. Figure out who the winner is. Let's go back up top. Let me tell you what I thought of it. All right, let's talk about it using my target audience system. Let's start with thematic ties. You know, I'm not normally a big fan of this generic fantasy setting, but when it's handled tongue-in-cheek, when it's handled with a lot of humor and a lot of cute, funky illustrations, then I'm much more forgiving of it. So the theme in this one, I find, works towards the concept, towards how you win, makes sense, and I enjoy the way they handle it from an aesthetic point of view. So let's talk about that. Aesthetics, very much a fan of this. It's from the same artist who did the artwork on Viral. If you haven't seen that artwork, it is fantastic. And so when I first saw this, I was very captivated by it, and I couldn't quite place the look. Well, I looked it up, and there you go. Just love the look of the game. Now, the one thing I'm a little iffy on is the icons, meaning the index in the corner. Numbers are easy to read, very easy. The faction icon, I wish was a little more iconic. I wish it was a little bit simpler so you could at a glance tell what it is. It takes a little more observation than that, but this is a very, very minor thing, okay? You can just look at the card. It shows you the entire character right there. They're mainly color-coded, and the icon is fine if you give it an extra second to look at it, all right? So overall, the aesthetics, card quality, look of the box, look of everything is fantastic. High marks for that. Replayability and the scalability. Well, there's no scalability. It's only for 2 players. I'm perfectly fine with that because the replayability is quite nice. There is a good amount to discover here. The first time you play, it's going to seed that idea of what you could do, right? Of how you could manipulate your upcoming games. And from that point on, you are off to the races, trying to maybe gather the undead early and lock them in, being tricky and careful with maybe getting a bunch of doppelgangers to help you out in the second half of the game, or maybe getting some low-scoring dwarves to throw them into losing fights and take them right back. There's a good amount happening here. I really like the tactics in it, so the replayability is high for me. The game length is fantastic. You play 13 hands, right? 13 tricks, and then 13 again with the second half. My main worry there was that the first half was going to feel superfluous to the second half, but I haven't found that to be the case. It feels interesting, and the designer was smart enough to make some of the cards really matter, the ones you're playing, okay, not the ones you are drafting. matter in the first half, like those on Dead, and I like that very much as well. The ease of play, which is fiddliness, if there's any weird design choices, anything like that, it's not there. It's solid. There's no fiddliness. There's nothing that doesn't make sense. Once you figure out the 3 or 4 special powers, because really there's, the goblins don't really have one, and then the knights, it's a very minor thing. Once you figure out those little special powers, you're good to go. And the hands are so quick and simple to play, you're going to get into that rhythm, that trick-taking rhythm, right? And this one does not commit one of those trick-taking sins that I find so prevalent, and that is that they really outstay their welcome. Trick-taking games tend to be played for a bunch of hands, 1 hand per player, 2 hands per player, play to a billion points, and they usually end up outstaying their welcome. You really have to be in the mood to sit down and just take it easy. This one's a filler. This one will work fantastically among a night of other kinds of games, and that's rare, and it gets high marks from me for that. And then lastly, tactics and strategy. I've kind of sprinkled that around as in my talk here, but it's tactically rich. I love that the first half informs the second half. Yes, you might top deck a card that's better than the one I actually fought for. That's okay. It's a card game, It's 20 minutes or so. It works well. And I find it rich and interesting, and I like the idea of perhaps early in the game you set your mind to controlling these 3 factions, and I'm going to ignore the doppelgangers, don't care about them, I'm going to try for these things. Or I'm going to not worry about the knights, because there's so many goblins, I'm going to take them, and even if you take a few with knights, well, I'll take most of them with straight up goblin wins. Very clever. Again, lots of tactics here. So all of that to say that I really enjoyed Claim. It was a surprise hit for me. It's if I'm looking for a trick-taking game and I only got one opponent, I don't have a lot of choices, But now I have a few really good choices, and Claim is certainly one of them. So I recommend that you check it out. This one gets a seal of excellence from me. Claim. Look into it, folks. I think you're really going to like it.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.